Yes, welcome to Northern Lights, the podcast from Business Crack, brought to you by Barrnon Media, shining a light on business across Cumbria. I'm Nigel Thompson, and today we're in West Cumbria to get an insight into one aspect of the county's engineering industry. Also coming up, we're going underground to hear how Cumbrian slate is still very much in demand.
We get quite a good number for just a small family business. It depends on the slate quality of how much we get out a year, essentially, but with the lads and the team that we've got now, it's working really well.
And we're meeting the new owners of one of the Lake District's best known attractions.
We're not afraid of change, and we're not afraid to kind of adapt things. We are quite a reactive business.
Yes, for this edition of Northern Lights, I'm at Westlakes Science and Technology Park in Whitehaven, just outside, in fact, and we're joined the guests of Delkia Limited. I'm pleased to say, joined by the man at the top, the CEO, Kurt Canfield. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Nigel. I'm pleased to be here. Thank you.
It's good to meet you, and nice to be in this fantastic palatial office in the centre of the park itself. I mean, driving around, you forget how big a site this is. It's huge.
It's a very big site. It's fantastic. We've got a lot of blue chip clients on here as well. Works for the staff, and lots of bunny rabbits jumping across the field. So it's very nice.
I even saw an oyster catcher as a part of the car just a few minutes ago. So all wildlife and lots of science, as you say. Perhaps we can talk about that. Well, maybe now. I mean, Delkia. Tell us a bit more for those who don't know about the firm. How long have you been around, and what do you do?
Yeah, thanks, Nigel. So Delkia is a spin-off from what was a previous consultancy company called Safety Critical. Safety Critical did the actual safety care side of it, and the intention with Delkia was to do the engineering implementation of it. So very much control, electrical and instrumentation based, but operates in highly regulated industries. So nuclear, defence. But our golden thread is about safety-related and mission-critical systems. So our purpose as an organisation is about protecting the lives and critical assets. And how we do that through our mission statement is about providing engineering and technology services to implement them control systems to protect lives and assets. And that's pretty much what we do. And we've been going now for about 2013. So we've been trading and operating for about 10 years. And we grew from me, the wife, 2 dogs. Although I have to say they didn't do much engineering, to be fair.
Yeah.
And then we've grew that up to 131 people as a Sunday today, and we're recruiting for about another 20 on top of that.
Wow,
which is fantastic.
Business is good, and not just here in West Cumbria. I know you have sites across Cumbria, but also in the northwest as well.
That's right, and we're not just regional. We're national as an organisation now. But actually, with the acquisition of Synthesis Defence Systems (SDS), which we did in November last year, that's now took us international into NATO countries. So it's really it's really exciting times, and of course we've just had the strategic defence review as well. So that's good news for the defence industry and for the UK PLC. So not just engineering, and I think that's also good news for the nuclear industry as well.
Just taking a step back, I mean, your growth and your transition from, as you said, was it you, your wife, and your dogs as well? Quite an increase in quite a short space of time, about a decade. Has it been straightforward? I imagine it's not, but what kind of story has it been then from inception to where you are today? Yeah,
so we've set off as a micro business, and that micro business was a spin-off, which we had a management team in there that ran it from about 2013 through 2019. And as I came out with Golden Handcuffs contract from the acquisition of Safety Critical, and I sold that in 2016, the decision was to come back into the business and run Delkia from that point. So I've been here for about 6 years now. So from that point, we basically put a new strategy in place. We give it purpose. We develop the values as a business as well, which defines our culture as an organisation. And the growth has really come off the back of that. Even in challenging times such as the pandemic in 2019-20. So when that actually came out, and we actually, we were really, really fortunate at that particular point in time when the actual pandemic came. We just won our largest contract in that particular month, which took us through that rough, challenging time. But then the business just went from strength to strength. And, when we thought, well, we can do it in nuclear, and we can go to nuclear decommissioning, we can go into defence. And if we can go defence, we can go defence national. We can go national, then we can go overseas. So the business ambition, and it's a really ambitious target, is to be 50 million turnover by 2028. And we're currently on track for that.
Wow, congratulations. But having said that, the kind of areas that you look at, defence, nuclear, I mean, these are kind of highly regulated, very closely monitored industries. So to make sure that as a contractor you satisfy the various British standards, British safety, things like that must be quite hard to make sure that you can tick the box. And when you're putting a bid in for some work, that a firm based here and still, growing as well, especially when you're starting out, it can actually meet the criteria that you need to win these very crucial, very lucrative contracts.
Yeah, I think that's a fair observation. They are two highly regulated industries, and not only just that, but they are the cottage industries as well. So they're quite difficult to get access to market, generally speaking, because of that reason. But the government are doing quite a lot of good things that are coming out of that at the moment. So if you look at the Strategic Defence Review, they're setting up SME hubs to try and break down those barriers to actually get more sovereign organisations and PLCs, which I'm pleased to say myself and Delkia will be part of that forum to try and drive that change and bring more new SMEs into the market and try and grow that forward. So I think it's an exciting time for the industry. And we've got the capacity and capability across currently our 5 sites. Through that acquisition, we'll consolidate them down to 2 in due course, but we're investing massively into our infrastructure and staff. So I'm quite excited.
Yeah, it certainly sounds it. And it's good to hear you're not daunted or put off by the fact that you've got all these regulations to meet, like I say, but also the change in government, the budgets that may or may not be coming into defence and into nuclear as well, as we're hearing on the news even today. It is a kind of very fluid world out there, isn't it? There isn't like a 5 or a 10-year plan. It seems to be quite short term. So when you're in business, trying to make sure that you have a plan and your colleagues, and you're saying you're growing as well, it must be a bit of a bit of luck, but also making sure that you are in touch with Sellafield and what's the government are thinking. And do you find yourself having to read and watch everything to try and work out which way the wind's going to blow in the future?
I think if you look at the last 5 years, just in society and the world, I think it's been a VUCA environment, volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous. Yeah. So I think from that perspective, it's very difficult for a modern day business leader to just say that's the one strategy and just go for it in that particular way without seeing all the different dynamics and pivots around that. So, but that said, I think the best thing and advice I can give to most business leaders is to try and get that soundboard, get the expertise. One of the things what we did when we got to a certain size is we developed a board. We brought in a chair, so I have a chair and a boss that I have to report into and be held accountable to non-executive directors. And because of that governance and that charter, what it does is it gives you that soundboarding and protection, actually gives you a bit more, have I got this right? Are we going in the right direction? And just that sanity check. And 9 times out of 10, we come back to the strategy, which is a corporate strategy, which is, it's fantastic for the business we've got. It's generally right. Might have a few tweaks, but in the main, we'll go in the right direction. And I think when you've got so many dimensions moving all the time around you, sometimes actually just saying, what are we good at? What do we keep doing? How do we increase our addressable market and keep going from there? And that's what I find part of our success. Stick to what we're good at and do it well and keep doing it.
Good stuff. Good to hear. Kurt, for now, thanks very much. We'll hear more from Kurt again shortly in the podcast Northern Lights. Now, at a time when crafts are dying out, the Honister slate mine continues to provide an increasingly rare commodity. For centuries, rooftops and landmarks all over have been crowned with a product handcrafted near England's wettest valley. Between 100 and 200 tonnes of roofing slate is produced each year, and we've been underground with Piers Wilkinson Weir, who manages the site.
So we're in level 5 of Honister. Honister slate mine, the Kimberley vein. So in Honister there's 3 veins. We currently are mining just the Kimberley.
And what we can see around us from this recent blast, this is fresh blasted slate, isn't it?
Correct, yeah. So there's a variation of different slate that we're looking at. A lot of it we can use for products, and some of it will be going up to the crusher to be crushed into aggregates.
We saw down at your workshop that beautiful, and it is beautiful kind of slate that is made into, up to roof slates. It looks fantastic. It's got that distinct kind of green hue to it, hasn't it, as well as Cumbrian green, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Buttermere green slate. Again, down in the workshops, it's all traditional ways of manufacturing really down there, which is a bit of a dying trade. So it's quite a privilege to work with. We get quite a good number for just a small family business. It depends on the slate quality of how much we get out a year, essentially. But with the lads and the team that we've got now, it's working really well.
It's a small team. It's a young team, isn't it, as well? I mean, are the people very keen to keep this tradition going?
Yeah, I think you always find different people, don't you? We've got a very good, strong team at the minute of young, enthusiastic people that just want to push an old trade on, really, yeah.
you say before this was your dad's sort of up there was your dad's initial scene, was it? You were
Yeah,
saying?
correct. So he was working essentially the level above our heads. We're opening up into that level now. So it's quite special to work just alongside him, really. Yeah.
I mean, it must have been a lot. I mean, it's taking on any family firm is a big concern, isn't it? It's a big kind of, you feel it on your shoulders, no doubt, as well. Every day you come to work. I mean, but you've obviously, like your brother, chosen to do this job. I mean, was it a tough choice to make, that to carry on and just to realise his dream?
Not really, no. Me and Brent, I mean, we grew up in here. It was our playground back in the day. We've always sort of wanted to fall into the family business. It was an easy choice in that respect. It's a lot to take on your shoulders as a young person. Now we're 3 years into it, and it's like the best decision we've ever made. Very stressful one, but yeah, the best one we've ever made.
What's the biggest stress or concern you have then doing this kind of job? I mean, I imagine safety's never far from your mind, I'm sure. But what are the things as well?
That's a good question. That. Safety is a massive one, especially in this day and age. Health and safety is key. You've got to make sure everyone that's working with us is doing the job correctly. That is a really hard one. But it's also keeping the whole team going, really. I mean, a lot of people's lives and families and things like that rely on Honister. So that's quite a big pressure in my head as well, yeah.
Sure, yeah. And your role, you say before on the way up here, that you're taking a bit of a back seat now, or relatively back seat, because you've got people doing the job that you used to do yourself.
Correct, yeah. So the lads that we've got in the mine are very well trained now, and I can rely on them to produce what I need them to produce. So I've taken a bit of a step back. I'm still involved in it a lot, and all the decisions made in here, and I'm still in here a lot myself, but I'm concentrating on the riving side and keeping that tradition and way of life alive, essentially, yeah.
And what does that entail, just for people like me who don't quite understand that? What does that mean?
So riving, taking a lump of stone that's come off the saws and riving it down the seams of slate into roofing slates, and then dressing them up and shipping them off, essentially. Yeah.
I guess making sure that nothing's wasted, that as much as possible blasted from here ends up on somebody's roof.
Yeah, 100%, yeah.
Or a memorial as well. Memorials as well.
Memorials, kitchen worktops, flooring, you name it, we'll make it, essentially. Yeah, we try to minimise waste as much as we can. We actually now use 100% of the stone that comes out of Honister. Back in the day, they'll have only used about 90%, and the rest will have gone over the sides. So yeah, we're not doing bad.
Piers Wilkinson Weir, you're listening to Northern Lights from Business Crack. I mean, I've got to say, Kurt Canfield is back with us from Delkia. And Kurt, I know you don't know if you've been to Honister Slate Mine, but I was in there, and the size of it, I mean, it's huge. It's probably as big as the building we're sat in at the moment, 3 stories high at least. And when you go inside, first of all, I was surprised. It was one of the hottest days of the year we recorded it, and it was pleasantly cool, about sort of 12, 13 degrees. But the amount of slate that's in there, and the colour,
It's a fantastic place. I haven't been in the caves, I have to say, and I've not done Via Verata either, but I'm not quite brave enough for that yet. But I'm sure my daughter will drag me up there at some point for sure. But Honister Slate and the Sky Cafe that I was up there is absolutely brilliant. We've been up there many times. It's a great place to be.
I mean, it's a good link between yourselves, cutting edge kind of technology and that very much kind of very historic technology. Do you think it's good to hear? I mean, what do you think when you hear stories like that it's still thriving, still doing very well on a small scale, of course, but it's still in demand? What do you make of that?
I think it's fantastic, and I think as technology brings up, and advances, things like AI, for example, it's testing the paradigm, and you can be negative and say some of that will be used for bad, but actually there's a lot of good in there, and actually I think that's where our optimism comes in. So if you look at things like the oil and gas industry, for example, I used to work in there 2007, 2008, and we used to pump oil out of the old reservoirs, and actually some of that reservoir you couldn't actually get to, but with modern technology now you can go back and extract it. So I think things like mining have always got an advancing with new technologies as they come through, and it's about how we exploit that as a society for our benefit in the future.
Yeah, good food for thought. And talking of kind of historic and long-established businesses as well, you've got a connection with one very local that's proving very popular, and fingers crossed could start producing a brew, there's a hint, listener, in the next few weeks' time. Tell us about Jennings.
Yeah, no, it's a family project, that one. So I confess, Nigel, there's no link between Delkia and Jennings apart from the owners. But the wife is, hat off to her. She was looking at that particular site at the time for a wine business, and I was looking at it from a Delkia office's perspective as well. Get stuck into our roots as a business, being local in West Cumbria. And it was through negotiations that, it was basically came about there was an opportunity to actually bring them back together from the south and bring Jennings back. And at that point, once we realised that, it became a sort of family project, heart overhead, and actually the offices sort of went right to the back. But it's a great business. My wife, hat off to her in terms of pivoting that business from a wine business into a 100% beer business now, and focusing 100% on the Jennings, and we've appointed a fantastic managing director in there, which is Chris France, so he's spearheading that on behalf of the family, and he's doing a fantastic job. I think the future is going to be really, really bright, I think, for Jennings. And they're not just really going to be a microbrewery, they're going into full-on production. They're talking about national contracts as well, but I won't steal Chris's thunder now. I'll let you have that podcast with Chris.
Excellent stuff. I mean, I have to say, it's testament to perhaps the loyalty or the interest there's been. Every time there's a story on Business Crack and our sister site, Cumbria Crack, of course, as well, the comments and the amount of shares that it gets, are just off the scale, because people are so eager, I think is the word, to see it back in production. There is a real love for Jennings. When I know it's been around in some shape or form, it hasn't, never not been around, but the fact it's been brewed back in Cockermouth, the home of Jennings, I think just means a lot to Cumbrians.
It does, and I think, you come back to heritage, and I think, someone described it as taking the heartbeat out of Cockermouth. And I think that's quite apt. So, we're now putting that back in, and not only are we putting it back in, we're putting it back in with local ownership and, independence. So I think from our perspective, one of the values which is core to myself and for Delkia as well, and as a team, is social value and social economics. And I think, in that testament, we walk the walk. Yeah. So if we're protecting our heritage and looking after the local area, that just feels like the right thing to do.
We've done quite a bit of coverage of Team Barrow, which I'm sure you've read and maybe you've experienced of as well. And they're trying to sort of really promote Barrow as a place to live and work, and also not just the jobs that are there at BA and other locations as well, but the fact that if you go and live there with the family, the Lake District's on your doorstep. You've got Morecambe Bay. It's not just the kind of the job; it's life outside work. And I wonder sometimes, you think people forget that there is more to life than just work.
Absolutely, and I think it's an amazing story. I think in terms of Team Barrow, especially in light of the Strategic Defence Review, 12 new submarines as well that comes off the back of that, new facilities and £15 billion investment. Yes, that will take time to come through, but actually the intent is there. We've got 2.5 GDP investment 2027, and of course there's a promise of another 3% on top of that. And I think that's welcomed for Barrow, and not just that, but for the actual maritime industry and the defence industry as a whole. So it's exciting times, but you're right, it's actually exploiting them sticky pound notes. How do you keep them in the community and actually get some benefit for society and the local community off the back of that major investment? And that's true not just down in Barrow, but it's also true in West Cumbria as well. And I think overall, collectively, there's more to do, but I think we're going in the right direction.
So do you think your wife's work, the dogs, I know, which are still prominent in your life as well? I think I saw a picture of you recently with your massive, what breed are they again?
Newfoundlands, two of them.
Yeah. They're huge. They probably eat as much as our household. But anyway, that's another story. But when it comes to the amount of, the fact of time and effort that's spent on work, doing something and seeing something thriving in a place like Cockermouth, for example, not far from here, and certainly on a tourist track, and if you're local, it enhances your life as well, doesn't it? Somewhere else to go to or look out for, and of course it brings work. So do you think that when it comes to being in business, perhaps anyone in business has to have that kind of outward-looking view as well as the inward, the bottom line, the horizon? A lot of views, a lot of things to look at. But do you know what I mean? Do you think it's important that, if you are in business, you need to think about how you'd attract new employees, what's the benefit to come and work in West Cumbria or South Cumbria or wherever, but also, what's in it for the future? Thinking of future generations, why stay in Cumbria? Because I know that's a big issue that's been highlighted by Enterprise in Cumbria and others, that people tend to go from Cumbria to go to university. Not everyone comes back. So do you think there's an element of making sure that it's seen as more attractive a place to return to once you've got your qualification?
Yeah, and I think, if we come back onto, some of the works that we're doing in terms of the investments through Delkia, and also the social value side that we've done there, even with Whitehaven Community Trust, we're supporting that as well, which is, protecting, the homeless and the young and the vulnerable within the West Cumbria area, which I think is a fantastic charity. But there's more to do, and I think that's what I alluded to before in terms of that more to do. So with, take Jennings as a project, it was lost and it's gone, and now it's coming back. We can do more of that, and actually, should we have a bowling alley? Where's the entrepreneur that's going to bring that bowling alley up, and where's the next thing? So we've got the next generation of kids, but they've got activities to do, and they've got STEM to do. Yeah. We're a big ambassador for STEM, and we really promote that and push that forward. In Delkia alone, our technical engineer director has just gone through a process of trying to recruit 20 graduates, and that process is coming through, and that's across the north of England for our other facilities as well, which is just absolutely brilliant, and that's where the investment should be coming. But you're right, in terms of West Cumbria coming back, there needs to be that ecosystem that harnesses it and keeps them retained in the area. But we're doing it. I think there is work to do, and we are starting to do it. And I think I encourage other entrepreneurs and business leaders to invest in that area, and then we can create that ecosystem that I'm talking about.
It's good to hear, and thanks again. We'll talk more before we finish, but this is a great story, I think, that many people may have heard about, but let's just hear a bit more about this, because it's one of the Lake District's best known attractions, whether or not you have green fingers. But Hayes Garden Centre now has a new owner. The Ambleside site is part of British Garden Centres. So how do you adapt a business that has a wealth of history, has been on the same site for 200 years? Well, Amy Stubbs is marketing manager for Hayes.
So we've currently got 73 garden centres across the country. We're a family-run business that started 35 years ago this year, with the first garden centre back in Woodthorpe. And that was where my dad and my uncle, they started it by selling plant cuttings on the roadside, and then got enough funds to kind of create their first proper garden centre site. And then over the years have slowly grown, and when Wyvale went into administration, we kind of, was our key point of growth. We kind of almost went from 15 centres to 56 overnight almost. So it's been quite an interesting 4 or 5 years, because we've had to play so much catch up from going from a relatively small business to a big business. But very much still very family run and have lots of family values, and that's quite an important part to what's making us unique, really.
Obviously the industry and the current economic climate is going through quite a change. So to have expanded as rapidly as you have, how many people do you employ? You're conscious that you have become kind of a nationwide brand in quite a short space of time.
So we employ over 3,000 people now. Definitely a big workforce. We've definitely learned a lot. We learned a lot through COVID, and we've learned a lot every year because there's just been different challenges that we've been facing. But I think something that, as an industry we're quite good at, and also particularly as a business, is we're not afraid of change, and we're not afraid to kind of adapt things. We are quite a reactive business, which, in some ways is really good, and particularly when there's challenges like this. But over the last few years, we've got a lot closer to what our reporting looks like and what kind of the facts and figures are telling us, and then from that taking deep dives in, and we've put ways that we can manage wage costs in and monitor what that is on almost an hourly basis. I think we're keen that we don't go in and make any rash decisions, because I think we are accepting that it's slightly different, so we need to learn from it. But I think one of the things that we are very keen is to try and expand the restaurant and improve the restaurant offering. I think we see that as a really good opportunity, and we are quite landlocked and restricted as to where it is at the moment. So that's something that we're really keen to progress with. We're kind of keen that we trade through this busy season, but then we're hoping to try and make some changes pre-Christmas. Hayes have always had a really good reputation for their Christmas displays, and we definitely will continue to achieve, and if not over achieve what those expectations are. And then I think we'll go from there and see what next year brings.
So yes, Amy Stubbs there from British Garden Centres. Congratulations to her and good luck for the coming year. Well, finally, Kurt Canfield, again, thanks for your hospitality and your interest in the podcast today. Great to hear their ambition. I mean, we're halfway through the year. We're getting towards June, summertime. I know you're heading off soon for a well-deserved break. What's your take on Cumbria and kind of how business is going? We've so much going on, it seems, with jobs coming and jobs going, sadly. What's your feeling now as we head towards summer in Cumbria?
Yeah, I think I'm ever the optimist, so I'll always be on a positive front. I think that's. But we do see, and we've seen it recently, I guess, in some closures of some of the businesses, which is a shame. And we've seen that, to be fair, in the last 2 or 3 years, the past as well. If you look at, for example, James Fisher Nuclear, and sadly when that went into administration. However, in some ways, and I said this once before, there's never a good time to go into that, but it's always beneficial for the staff if there's a buoyant market that can actually take up that capability. And I think in terms of local companies, that's what they're doing at the moment. They're rallying together as a community as they do to provide that future sustainability for careers and employment. I think, likewise, Delkia is no different to that, especially in a cottage industry that we are, both in defence and in nuclear. So I think, there's always light at the end of the tunnel. I think no matter what happens in terms of some of the challenges that we see in sectors, and I think in terms of the steel industry, for example, we've seen privatisation going to government-owned assets from Camelard. So I think there's definitely changes afoot within the sector. But from a Delkia perspective, we just see, we've got a fantastic corporate strategy. We've got a great team. Our order book we just won our largest contract to date as an organisation, and our order book is the highest it's ever been, which will run into the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. So we're really positive and optimistic for the future, and we're just going to keep pushing the business, driving that forward, for the benefit of the staff and the community that we operate in.
You just said you're a cottage industry. I think you said it earlier in the podcast as well. But when do you become not a cottage, a 3-bedroom semi-industry? When do you expect? How long will it be known as a cottage? Because it seems to me that you're actually, you're doing very well.
We are, and I think that's because we operate probably in 2 cottage industries. I suppose what I mean by that is that they're quite difficult markets to get into. Generally nuclear is a hard market to penetrate. We've seen many companies come from overseas into the local area just to think that they're going to just go great guns and fantastic sales, and it's a lot harder than it is. Usually, coming back to your point in terms of governance, standards, regulations, it takes a long time to develop them up, and therefore the penetration to that market is quite hard to do unless you do it by acquisition, of course. So it can be challenging for new entries in there. However, there's a lot of good work that's being done now from an SME perspective that will open that door, and I think more opportunities both in the defence and nuclear markets in the UK PLC.
What do you want to see happen then the next few months? When you come back refreshed from your break and you're kind of looking at what's on the horizon, perhaps personally for yourself, but certainly for the business and for this part of the world as well. What's the kind of, is there 1 or 2 things that you think would make a real difference that you just like to see happen, whether it's a cultural thing or a business thing or a mixture of the 2?
I think for us, we try to live and die by our values, and the culture is really, really important. And I think it's really hard, actually, for modern day leaders in such change to be able to try and get that culture, and especially a digital culture, when you're fragmented and you've got remote workers and you've got staff in the overseas, you've got staff in the south, and of course an epicenter and critical mass locally. I think it can be quite challenging. That said, I think there's a lot more work to do in terms of adopting technologies to be able to drive that digital culture forward. So, we touched on AI before. I think there's a great opportunity, I think, in AI for engineering businesses, and it's something that we're investing into heavily to try and promote the advances for our clients as well and accelerate programs.
So for people listening, you don't think it should be seen as a threat to jobs? I was hearing, numbers of jobs are reducing because AI can take over kind of fairly repetitive roles that were done before by people, think like coding, things like that. Do you think that with care, AI is a benefit and can actually enhance jobs rather than replace people?
I think there'll be a change. I think it would be daft to think that there wouldn't be a change, but I think it should be embraced, not seen as to come away from it. And the reason for that is you're absolutely right in terms of ethics and how it's developed and used. I think has to be done right in terms of that development. but you can't ignore it. It is advancing at such a quick rate, especially in engineering, that you will, if you ignore it, you're behind in terms of your competitors. But wind back 5 years ago, even in engineering and pushing technology, I was slightly resistant because of the very nature of security and the worries that you have around it, etc.
Change, isn't it? It's where people are worried about change.
I think it is change, but I think it's a positive change. I think there'll be different types of jobs, and we talked about it internally in terms of what does the future look like for the next generation of engineers. And for us, we're employing a designer today, but in actual fact, going forward 10 years, it might not be a designer because the technology is going to be there that can actually do this for us. Our advances for persons that haven't got them engineering design skills. So I think there's a radical shift in the skill sets, and I think the difficult part is at the rate at which it's moving is trying to forecast what's that skill set and capability I need in the next 5-10 years. But it's opportunistic, and we're already seeing that through the courses for universities. We're engaged with Lancaster University, and we're engaged with many other universities across the UK as well in terms of AI and advances in that. So that's good to see, because we're taking on AI and master degree people now to be able to drive our business forward for the future. So I think it's exciting.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, it certainly comes across, and I can get the sense that you are kind of looking to the future with confidence and with kind of relish rather than kind of worried about what the future might hold. And I guess one final question when it comes to, you mentioned before again about the kind of international organisations that might come and try and look for work in this part of the world. Do you feel that you're on an equal playing field because you are locally based? Do you find you're having to shout a bit louder because you're a cottage industry? Or are you kind of on the same kind of wavelength, or the same kind of grounding as the big boys, if you like?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that gets me out of bed in the morning when it comes to Delkia. Actually, we've resisted acquisition as an organisation. We will continue to resist our acquisition because it's about developing UK PLC, and we're starting to see that. Even with the Trump tariffs, for example, and we've got things like the SDR review that came out last week, we're starting to see a paradigm shift in terms of onshoring capability in UK sovereignty, and we've not been there for such a long time because of international trade, which is now fickle in the current the environment. So I think for me it's a really exciting time to build that UK PLC. And I always take the tadpole, expect where you got the big head at the top, where you got your big businesses, and then right at the bottom you got your little SMEs down there. And I think what we're doing is we're moving up that tail, and we're getting to a bigger size and organisation. So I think it's something to be proud of, that we are building UK capability, and as a team we are collectively proud of that.
That's good to hear. Kurt, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for joining us. Kurt Canfield there, CEO of Delkia in West Cumbria. Yeah, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, where we have new fortnightly newsletter containing more stories from Business Crack. Feel free to comment, ask a question and share this podcast. I'm Nigel Thompson. Thanks for listening to Northern Lights.